Marc Abrahams founded the Ig Nobel Prize in 1991. The awards are handed out by Nobel laureates every year at either Harvard University, MIT, or Boston University. Shortly after our interview, Marc announced a dramatic change for the awards ceremony. Quote, "After 35 years in the USA, the Ig Nobel Prize ceremony is moving to Europe. This coming September, the 36th First Annual Ig Nobel Prize ceremony will take place in Zurich, Switzerland. We cannot in good conscience ask the new winners or the international journalists who cover the event to travel to the USA this year." Close quote. Listen now as Marc Abrahams joins the Plutopia podcast to discuss the Ig Nobel Prize and the reasons it exists.
If you win an Ig Nobel Prize, you've done something that will make almost anyone anywhere immediately laugh and then start thinking. So there's something about it that whatever it is will just instantly make somebody start laughing, and then it'll stick in their mind if we've chosen well, and for the next week or so all they want to do is tell their friends about it, talk about it. But it has nothing to do with whether the thing is good or bad or valuable or worthless. Could be all of those or none of those. If you set out to create, devise, invent something that has that effect, you're almost certainly going to fail. You can do one or the other. You can invent something that makes people laugh. You can invent something that makes people really start thinking. But to invent something that does both of those, that's really difficult. Don't try, really, it's just a side effect.
So welcome everybody to the latest episode of the Plutopia News Network podcast. I'm John Lebkowski, one of your co-hosts, the other two being Scoop Sweeney and Wendy Grossman. And the three of us love to talk to interesting people. And one of the most interesting people in the world these days is Marc Abrahams. He's a mathematician. He's a scientific editor. He's the editor and co-founder of the Annals of Improbable Research and master of ceremonies at the annual Ig Nobel Prize celebration, which he founded in 1991. So it's been going on for quite a while. He was formerly the editor of, this was one of my favorites, the Journal of Irreproducible Results. Wow. So Marc, hello.
Hi.
Welcome.
Hi.
How did you get into celebrating improbable research? Kind of going back to, you started with the Journal of Irreproducible Results, and I guess that was something somebody else started and you picked it up?
Yeah. So I'll give you what may be a kind of rambling answer to your question, which is pretty much everything I'm doing now I was doing when I was a kid, but not in the same form and not especially well. How long ago? 35, 36 years ago, I got curious. I had always been writing lots of stuff that I thought was interesting and funny and showing it to a couple of friends, and that was the end of it. And I started wondering whether I could get something published because I'd never tried. So I sent some stuff off. Somebody told me that there was a thing called the Journal of Irreproducible Results. The somebody who told me was somebody you may have known or known of, Martin Gardner, who wrote a column in Scientific American for a long time and did all kinds of other great stuff.
I was actually last week just at Gathering for Gardner, which is a celebration of Gardner and his works and people doing things to follow on.
I didn't know where you would even send something if you write funny stuff about science. So I wrote to Martin Gardner, who was the only person I could think of who might know. And he was very kind and very encouraging. So he told me about this old magazine that he thought was long gone, but suggested I try it. I sent some stuff off to an address for this magazine. And a few weeks later, I got a phone call from a guy who said, "Hi, I am the publisher of the magazine. I got your articles. Would you be the editor of the magazine?" So that's how I got into this world. And almost immediately, I was meeting all kinds of people who'd done very unusual things, and many of them were themselves very unusual. And I kept thinking that most of these people are really not known and probably never will be known. And that's a great shame. It's almost criminal. Somebody should do something. And then I realized, well, okay, we've got a little magazine, we can do something. And so we started the Ig Nobel Prizes. And the we was me and a whole bunch of friends and people I've been meeting. And suddenly those people were including people who had things like Nobel Prizes and had invented this and invented that, and a lot of journalists and teachers and all. A lot of people who were just really, really, really helpful on things. So in 1991, we had the very first Ig Nobel Prize ceremony. And we kind of knew what we were doing, but kind of didn't. It worked out really well. We picked some winners. We put some notices on the internet, which at that point was much smaller, about the first annual Ig Nobel Prize ceremony happening at MIT on a particular date. And tickets would be free that first year, but you had to go to a special office at MIT to get them on a particular day. And on that day, all the tickets disappeared. So suddenly we had an audience, had a place to have this, because somebody who ran the museum there offered to let us have it in the museum. Picked some winners, had a bunch of famous scientists who agreed to come and hand out the prizes. And everything kind of worked. And it also got a lot of attention around the world in the press. So the next year, we were able to do it on a much bigger scale. And that's continued ever since. And this is now going to be the 36th ceremony, the 36th, first annual Ig Nobel Prize ceremony.
How do you fund it? Is it expensive to do?
It's expensive to do, and we fund it any way we can think of to scrape together enough, which mostly is selling tickets to it, because none of us are any good at all about raising funds or getting sponsors. So we sell tickets, and we have an awful lot of really good volunteer effort put in by a lot of people, and a lot of people around the world. Barring that, none of this really could have gone very long.
Do you sell a lot of merchandise?
No, because we're really incompetent.
Well, I would think having a Ig Nobel medallion of some sort. I know of one politician that would just loves getting everyone else's award. So maybe
who's that? You have in mind?
President Trump just likes getting free awards.
Well, he already has one Ig Nobel Prize. You want him to be greedy?
Oh, I didn't realize he was a recipient.
What did he win for?
Yeah, in the year 2020, he and 8 co-winners, each of them the head of a different country, won the Ig Nobel Prize for, for science education, medical education. And it was for demonstrating that politicians can have a faster and bigger effect on life and death than scientists and doctors can.
You do realize he wants the Ig Nobel Peace Prize now. I mean, is that a possibility?
How do you know this? You're making a claim here.
Well, I mean, we know he wants the Nobel Prize for peace, right?
Well, that has nothing to do with us.
I know, but he would settle for the Ig Nobel Prize.
Well, you're speaking for somebody you don't know, right?
I think it's a possibility.
And you're speaking for somebody.
There's a phone around here somewhere.
It's crazier
I could call him.
You're speaking for somebody you don't know, whose words usually mean nothing at all. So, what am I to make of what you're telling me?
Well, so let me back up.
Please.
How possible is it that Donald Trump could win the Ig Nobel Peace Prize?
Anything is, as they say, is possible. Now, having said that, if you or any other individual sets out to win an Ig Nobel Prize, your chances are pretty slim just based on the numbers. We get something like 9,000 new nominations every year for the Ig Nobel
Yeah,
Prize.
I was going to ask about that
Yeah.
actually. That's a lot of nominations, and as far as I know, and you can kind of let us know, there's may not be a lot of duplications in there. So you got to go through a lot of inputs. How many people does it take to settle on finalists?
A lot of questions in your one question there.
I always put a lot of questions in my questions.
I'm intrigued to follow that wording, but I won't. There is some duplication in there. It's not uncommon especially if there's something in the news that seems to have the quality. The quality, by the way, to win a prize is different than I think, for any other prize. The quality is that if you win an Ig Nobel Prize, you've done something that will make almost anyone anywhere immediately laugh and then start thinking. So there's something about it that whatever it is will just instantly make somebody start laughing. And then it'll stick in their mind if we've chosen well. And for the next week or so, all they want to do is tell their friends about it, talk about it. But it has nothing to do with whether the thing is good or bad or valuable or worthless. It could be all of those or none of those. And anybody can send in a nomination. A lot of people nominate themselves. Typically 10% to 20% of what comes in are self-nominations. They almost never win, but very few have. And we have a big group of people, the Ig Nobel Board of Governors, that makes the decisions about which 10 people or groups will win a prize in a particular year. The things come in not all on the same day, and they're distributed kind of evenly around the whole 12 months of the year. So it's not so difficult to filter things out. The largest percentage of anything you're going to select, no matter what it is, the largest percentage fairly clearly is not quite going to make it. So it's easy to filter the large number down to a much smaller number. And that's where all the work comes in. And we select mostly by having lots and lots of arguments among ourselves.
I remember one year you gave an award to the inventor of the pink lawn flamingo.
Yeah. Don Featherstone, who created the plastic pink flamingo, won an Ig Nobel Prize in the field of art. We give 10 prizes every year. The categories are changeable. We don't necessarily have fixed categories. We work it the other way. We pick the winners first, and then for each winner, we try sometimes very hard to figure out, is there some category that would describe what this person did? So Don Featherstone did win a prize for creating the plastic pink flamingo, which has all kinds of, as with many things that won a prize, it has all kinds of stories when you dig in the slightest bit, and you find that the citation is just the opening to a lot of stories, not just one story. He came to the ceremony, and we became pretty good friends. And he came to the ceremony pretty much every year for almost the rest of his life. He died a few years ago.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. I was wondering, what was his acceptance speech like?
I don't remember the details. You can go look it up. We've been webcasting the ceremony since 1995. It was the first year we started doing it. That also, we later were told it was one of the very first things ever webcast. So Don's year is up there, and you can go on our website. We got links to all the video, and you can see his speech and listen to it.
Yeah,
but, we've given 350 prizes, whatever. So I don't remember in detail everybody's acceptance speech. I'm sorry to say.
I was listening to one recording and came across the Elements song, which I hadn't heard in years. Did you play that song every year, or is that?
No, not every year, but Tom Lehrer wrote that song. I'm guessing that an awful lot of your listeners are very familiar with that. I hope they are.
Was he ever there?
Yeah, Tom Lehrer's songs meant a lot to me. When I was in fourth, fifth, and sixth grade, I had the same math teacher who would play Tom Lehrer's songs, among other things. And when we started the Ig Nobel Prize, I worked up my courage and I looked him up and called him and invited him to come. So he came to the very first Ig Nobel Prize ceremony. And a few years later, I started writing little operas that would be part of the ceremony. And when I say that sounds grander than it is, I started writing stories and words to old music by dead composers, and asked Tom to help me get better at that, which he very kindly did for the first few years. So it's I got to learn a lot, and I got to learn it, from somebody who was extremely, extremely good.
So this ceremony, you mentioned opera. It includes opera, maybe a banana costume, timekeepers, Nobel laureates.
No bananas, at least not yet. But
oh, you haven't had a banana yet? Okay.
Well, that's you're opening up many different subjects here. In
well,
the
my
ceremony,
question was going to.
No.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm your guest. I'm always right,
That's
no
true.
matter what I.
That's true. You're right. You're right.
I can pretend I'm Donald
The guest
Trump.
is always right.
Yeah. At the ceremony, we have 10 winners and a bunch of other people, so lots of speeches. And after the first few years, it really became evident to us that we had to get much better about making everybody's speeches end before the audience got tired and before the thing stretched out into the wee hours. But we tried a bunch of stuff, and we came up with some pretty reliable, pretty simple devices. Bananas, people in banana costumes is something we've been doing in other events we do, sometimes on the road, because that's easy. The main device we have been using for, I think more than 20 years now in the ceremony is an invention we call Miss Sweetie Poo. Miss Sweetie Poo is a very cute eight-year-old girl. We select a new one every year and work closely with her and her parents. She sits on stage during the whole ceremony, and whenever she feels that somebody has talked long enough, which is usually about 1 minute, she gets up and walks all the way across the stage, looks up at the person who is giving the speech, and she says, "Please stop, I'm bored. Please stop, I'm bored. Please stop, I'm bored. Please stop, I'm bored." She doesn't stop until they do. And that works.
Well, that means that Donald Trump probably would not fit your setup there, because he's clocking in at a couple of hours for his speeches lately. So,
good, keeps him off the streets.
That is true.
A gathering for Gardner, the talks were limited to 6 minutes, and the way they got people to do it is they paid them $1 if they were a minute short.
And that works?
Apparently, yeah. It kept remarkably to time, to the point where they actually added extra speakers off the waiting list.
Oh, good. Glad to hear about that. I didn't know that technique.
My technique personally, when I've moderated panels and I knew that somebody on the panel was likely to go on for a long time, is I would take a balloon and I would explain at the beginning that I would pop the balloon if anybody, and all you have to do is pick up the balloon and the audience is kind of staring at the balloon.
Well, my question was going to be, is this the most accurate model of scientific discourse that we've got?
Here too, you're asking questions that really have lots of questions inside them.
I know. I'm really sorry about that.
No, you're not, and I don't think you need to be either. It's really interesting.
I have trouble pouring them out.
Yeah, it helps to keep things really short because people are much more likely to pay attention. And the little, what starts out as a question stays as a question. It doesn't turn into 1,000 little speeches that don't give anybody else a chance to start answering the original question.
Yeah, it's always dangerous to let somebody take the stage, especially if they're feeling loquacious.
You just made me think of an event that would be kind of fun, at least the idea of it. The reality, I'm not sure of. I'm not sure of the circumstances that could bring this about, but for a certain kind of person who drones on, it would be kind of fun, I think, to have them up on a big stage in a room packed with people and have them start doing their usual droning on and encourage the audience beforehand, when you've had enough, just get up and leave and watch
I've
the
seen
place
that
empty out.
done.
Yeah.
I've seen that done in Edinburgh because during the festival and the festival fringe, which goes on for a month,
Uh-huh.
this is an audience that's been to thousands of shows, and they are ruthless about leaving when they're not interested anymore. I remember once being at a show at the Traverse Theater, and there were I think the cast was bigger than the audience, and still some people left after the first act.
There's the only thing like that I remember seeing was not in a theater. It was when I was in college. In fact, I never saw this. I heard of it. One of my friends, named Dave Karpuk, took a physics class that he felt he really didn't understand too well because the lecture wasn't very clear. So Dave would sit in the front row of this physics class, and he would pay attention. He wouldn't try to take notes because he really wanted to understand. And the moment he felt lost, he would quietly get up and leave. And he wasn't trying to do it to make a spectacle of himself. The next year, he and I and some other friends were at a party somewhere, and it turned out a bunch of people at that party had been in the class, and they recognized him. And they came up and explained that he was a great hero to them, that it was something they always wanted to do and never dared to. And apparently it was pretty disconcerting to the professor doing the lectures, although the professor didn't react by giving better lectures.
Did
So
he pass the class?
I believe so, but I don't know for sure. That was a long time ago.
Well, for the thousands of kids everywhere who hope someday to be able to win an Ig Nobel Prize, what advice would you give them?
Don't try. Just do what you're going to do. Winning an Ig Nobel Prize is a side effect. And this dual quality, something that makes anyone laugh and then think. If you set out to create, devise, invent something that has that effect, you're almost certainly going to fail. You can do one or the other. You can invent something that makes people laugh, and you can invent something that makes people really start thinking. But to invent something that does both of those, that's really difficult. Don't try. Really, really. It's just a side effect.
I find the question kind of amusing because what is it you tell winners every year? Better luck next year?
The very last thing I say during the Ig Nobel Prize ceremony, the very last thing is, if you didn't win an Ig Nobel Prize this year, and especially if you did, better luck next year.
When you decide to ask someone to accept the award, you give them the option of declining. Have you had someone accept and then realize what was going on too late and have a bad reaction in the ceremony?
Oh, no. We don't want to. We try very hard never to put people in a situation where they're going to feel embarrassed or really uncomfortable. So in almost every case, there are a few exceptions, but for people who are extremely famous and who we can't reach. But in almost every case, we do what you just described. Once we've chosen a person or a group, often a winner is sometimes a large group of scientists usually, we very quietly get in touch. We offer them the prize. And if they want to say no for any reason, that's fine. That's the end of it. We never tell anybody, and that's that. But most people who are offered the prize do accept. The kind of situation you're talking about where somebody accepts and then gets at the ceremony and decides on the spot that this is not what they wanted to get into. We've never seen that happen at all. The only thing even vaguely like that was there was one prize many years ago, went to a team of scientists, and they all were pretty happy about it. One of them came to the ceremony, and in fact has come and taken part in many events we've done since in many countries. Years later, 15 years or so afterward, one of that team who had not come to the ceremony decided for some reason that made no sense to us or to the other people on the team that she didn't want to have the prize and she wanted us to not give the prize or something like that. And it didn't make any sense to us. She didn't really want to discuss it, and the other people on the team thought, well, that's kind of crazy to ask that. So that was the end of that story.
But didn't you have some government official in the UK get pissed off because you were giving prize to UK scientists?
Yeah. Sir Robert May. This was 1995. This was the 5th year of the Ig Nobel Prize ceremony. And already by then it was becoming clear that the UK is one of the countries that seems pretty efficient at producing Ig Nobel Prize winners. and winners who are really happy to get the prize. But that year there was a team from England that won a prize. They won the physics prize, and it was for doing some experiments to try to understand how breakfast cereal flakes grow soggy in milk. They were pretty happy at winning the prize. They couldn't travel, so they made a little video of the three of them in lab coats with a bowl of cereal, saying whatever they were saying in their acceptance speech. A few weeks later, an envelope, really nice envelope, came to me in the mail. And it was from Sir Robert May, Chief Scientific Advisor to the British government. I had not heard of him. I'm not British, but I looked him up, and sure enough, he was. And the letter said he had just learned that we had given an Ig Nobel Prize to some British scientists and that we shouldn't do that. I thought he must be joking. I thought, okay, this is an example of the famous subtle British sense of humor. But just in case, I asked several British scientists I knew, do you know Sir Robert May? And, is there any chance he's not joking? And everyone I asked said, well, I don't know him personally, but he's very well known, and I'm sure he's joking. He has to be joking. So I wrote him a letter saying, I'm pretty sure you're joking, but just in case you're not, here's what it's all about and all that. He then sent me a second letter, which was much angrier than the first, demanding that we stop giving Ig Nobel Prizes to British scientists. So I thought, this is not going to be a conversation that really needs to continue in this way. But I had told a bunch of people, including a lot of journalists, who many of whom thought this was pretty funny and also something they wanted to write about. So he got a lot of attention around the world, and it turned out to be a good thing for pretty much everybody, because there are a lot of stories in the news and even some editorials saying what Sir Robert May did is an example of the kinds of things that make people uncomfortable about science, whereas the Ig Nobel Prizes make a lot of people really curious and eager to know more about science. So 3 cheers for the Ig Nobel Prizes. So I'm now kind of grateful to him. And I think he was just having a bad day, 2 bad days. And then there are a lot of little things that, one thing that happens often leads to other interesting things that happen. A couple of years later, we were giving an Ig Nobel Prize to yet another British scientist, and I was the person who called this scientist up to offer him the prize. And he instantly said yes. In fact, he knew all about the Ig Nobel Prizes, and he knew about the Robert May thing. So he said, does Bob May know about this, that you're going to give me a prize? I said, no. And he said, oh, I'm going to dinner at his home in 2 weeks, so I won't tell him.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah,
You
that
know,
wasn't the end of it either. His successor, after his term ended or whatever, as chief scientific advisor to the British government, the scientist who then became chief advisor made a point of coming to the Ig Nobel Prize in Massachusetts to the ceremony. And then a few months later, when I was doing an event in London, he also very nicely came to that and was on stage. So again, it turned out pretty happily for almost everybody.
You have
Everybody except Robert May.
I hope he got some amusement out of it.
you just had a number of events in Europe for the 2025 Ig Nobels, and how do you compare those to the ones that you've had in Boston?
The ceremony is, yeah, the ceremony is a different animal, different kind of animal from everything else. The ceremony, which happens in September, that's when we announce the new winners and have them appear on stage and get their prizes. They're secret until that moment, until they appear on stage. The events we do the rest of the year, and we do events in a lot of places, are many of them I will show up together with 2 or 3 people who have won Ig Nobel Prizes in the past, and I'll do a little talk about the Igs and show some pictures because it helps people understand this stuff is real if they see pictures. And then each of these Ig Nobel winners will do a short talk and maybe a demonstration and then take questions from the audience. Those are always really fun. The questions are always the best part of those too.
that's something we should do here, actually.
Yeah.
Now that I think about it, I maybe it would help people who I'm sure we have some listeners who are not as familiar with the Ig Nobel Prizes and haven't read the Annals of Improbable Research. Could you describe
What's wrong with
some
them? What's wrong with
I
them?
know, I know. Well, I was just thinking maybe you could describe some of the research that you've been covering recently to give them a sense of it.
You
Yeah.
posted a piece this morning about a drop of coffee.
Oh, yeah, that did not win an Ig Nobel Prize, but that's a study somebody published. Forget whether it was an individual or a team, where they tried to look at the physics and chemistry of what happens when you have a drop of a liquid, specifically a drop of coffee, and compared what happens to that over time if you have a drop of water in the same circumstances. There's a lot going on inside these little drops of liquid. And yeah, but that was not quite answering your question. So I'm looking at a list here of the 10 winners from the most recent crop of Ig Nobel Prize winners. So these got their prizes just this last September. One of them was a prize we gave posthumously. We've done that several times. If there's still somebody alive who knew the person well, a family member or somebody who worked with them and can come to the ceremony, and then giving a posthumous prize seems to work pretty well. This was Dr. William B. Bean. Are you familiar with Dr. Bean and any of you and his work?
I don't think so.
We gave him the Ig Nobel Literature Prize for a series of reports he published in medical journals. And the citation said that he was winning the Ig Nobel Literature Prize for persistently recording and analyzing the rate of growth of one of his fingernails over a period of 35 years. These reports are really kind of beautiful to read in the detail and the amount of thought and the graphs of what happens over time.
Yeah, I
And there's
remember this. It wasn't just his fingernails, right? Wasn't it his whole family as
Yeah, well,
controls?
as I remember, the reports talked about just his own, I think it was thumbnail mostly. He had a very careful system of putting markings so that he could see how it moved. But at the ceremony, his son, Bennett, came, and his son is now, I think, 83 years old. This was a while ago this happened, and Bennett, the son, said that, yeah, Dr. Bean did this with the whole family as they were growing up. And nobody really knew much about what happens about how fast your fingernails or anybody's do or don't grow. So he did discover some interesting stuff. For one thing, he discovered that in the course of a long lifetime, that growth rate of your nails, that will slow down as you get older. Another thing he discovered was that there were periods when he could see the growth really slowed down and even stopped. And those were periods when he had serious illnesses. And then after he recovered from his illness, the fingernails would start growing at their usual rate.
Does this mean he never cut his nails?
Oh, no, he cut his nails.
Yeah, that whole thing of measuring the whole family, it reminds me of what my parents did with our herd of kids, of measuring how tall we were and drawing it on a door frame. And that just sounds like a little mutation of the old family favorite.
Yeah. I think that's true of a lot of things that have won Ig Nobel Prizes, that if you really look at what people did and think about it, there's something that you may have yourself been involved in that on the face of it maybe is different, but underneath, you're getting at some of the same questions.
Does that list you have there include the one about how mammals can breathe through their anuses?
Oh, that was the year before.
Was that the year before?
That was a prize done by a Japanese team. And that's exactly what they found, that at least some mammals are able to breathe, to get in enough oxygen through their anus. If the oxygen is put there in a liquid, water infused with it or some other liquid infused with it, which may sound a little crazy or a lot crazy to you until you hear why they were doing this. They were very concerned with humans, and specifically with people who have really severe damage to their lungs, to the point where they're on the verge of not being able to get in enough oxygen to stay alive. And in fact, this all started with the father of the main doctor, the main scientist involved, who had some very serious problems. And that got his son thinking about this. How do you keep somebody alive if that's happening? And they were aware that there had been some scientific papers about how particular kinds of animals were able, under some circumstances, to breathe through their anus. So putting all these questions and facts together got them started testing this out. And
so the absorption is
yeah.
The absorption is not in the lungs. It's
right.
It's somewhere in the area of the anus.
Gets into the bloodstream through the anus.
Wow.
And they're not at all claiming it's something that should be used, casually, or that it's a pleasant thing. I have no idea how pleasant or unpleasant. It may depend on your idea of what's pleasant. But as something that might keep somebody alive for a while until they can heal up. Well, that's what they're looking at.
If it's the only way you can get oxygen, I imagine you would regard it as somewhat pleasant.
It's said to be a good thing to stay alive. Yes.
Well, one of your things that was in one of your speeches related to a colorectal exam experiment, I guess it was, where they introduced oxygen into the process that also included hydrogen and had some bad effects.
Yeah, we gave a prize, I guess about 12 or 13 years ago maybe, to a couple of doctors in France who had published some medical papers that were really advice to their fellow doctors who perform colonoscopies. The advice was about how to do that and minimize the chance that your patient will explode. And that goes back to the history of colonoscopies. From what I remember, which I learned at that time because of this prize, colonoscopies were not very common until maybe the 1940s or 50s, when the equipment was getting and the techniques were really developed to make it feasible to do to a lot of people, do with a lot of people. And when they began, of course, they didn't know exactly what's going to work out well and what might be more dangerous than it appeared. So all they knew at the start was if you want to look inside somebody's intestines and come at that from the rear, so to speak, you need to get some kind of scope in there so you can see. You're not going to fit in there yourself. And you need to have some light to get into the scope so you can't see in darkness. And you need to expand the space so that there's room to look. So you need to put a couple of things in there in addition to the scope, the tube that has a lens or whatever. You need to put in some kind of gas that will expand the person, expand the intestine, and you need to put in a source of light. So what they decided for the gas, since it was easy, since they had tubes full of it in the hospital, was, okay, we'll pump some oxygen in there. And in the 40s and 50s, pretty much anything that created light also created heat. So they had in the interior of human intestines in living people, which have generally a lot of methane gas, and they're adding oxygen to that and then adding heat. This is a good recipe for how to create and explode a bomb. And that's what happened to some of the early patients. So they being doctors in general who were doing this, pretty quickly decided that oxygen is not the best gas to use, and they started coming up with other techniques. And by the way, if you ever have had a colonoscopy or ever do have one, you know that generally you're asked to clean out your system pretty thoroughly beforehand. What's rarely explained to people is maybe the most important reason for that is to minimize the chance that you will explode.
Which would not be good. I guess that's what they refer to as a colonic gas explosion.
Yeah, you can refer to it that way too if you like.
I would. This is what I found looking it up. Apparently there have been about 40 of those in medical literature. So it's not a tiny amount.
No, and probably more. You know, what people write up and publish things about it usually is just, it's a very small chunk of what's happening.
So what else do you have on your list there?
Oh, all kinds of things. The one that ended up getting the most attention around the world was the physics prize that went to a team of, I think it's 8 young Italian physicists who made some discoveries about the physics of pasta sauce. In particular, a dish called cacio e pepe, which is a very simple dish of cheese and pepper and pasta. And it's simple to make, but it's difficult to make well, because if you're not doing it quite right, and with a little luck, the stuff will clump together in a way that people find very unpleasant. So they came up with a technique that pretty reliably lets you cook this stuff so it will come out pleasantly.
So we've talked a lot about the Ig Nobel Prizes, but you also published the Annals of Improbable Research.
True.
That's what, every other month?
Yeah, it comes out every other month, 6 times a year, and it's filled mostly with little reports about citations of, little snippets of all kinds of scientific and other research reports, patents, occasionally government documents, whatever, of things that have this same quality, that these are real things that will make almost anybody laugh and then think, and covering a endless range of stuff. People send this stuff to us every day. Sometimes they'll send it saying, I think this should win an Ig Nobel Prize. Sometimes it's just, this would you ought to write about this in the magazine, or sometimes it just is a little note saying, I want you to know about this. And fairly often, part of the note is, this is what I've been working on, or this is what my lab's been working on, or this is what my friend did that didn't get any attention and should.
Well, your prizes are handmade, I understand, and made with interesting materials. Who comes up with the designs?
Yeah, they're made from a different design, made of a different design every year, and always made from really cheap materials. And the design, I have a little hand in it, but mostly the design and all the construction is done by one person who's been doing it for about 30 years now. He works in the Museum of Science in Boston. That's his real job. His name is Eric Workman, and he just has a genius for doing this stuff.
One of them I saw, I believe it had a hammer in it. It said, take hammer and break glass, but of course it's behind the glass. And I thought that was a rather unique one.
The hammer is inside the glass. Yeah, another year, something with a similar kind of twist. We have a theme. Every year the Ig Nobel ceremony has a different theme. Not for the things that win prizes, but for the opera and the other stuff. One year the theme was nano, very small. The prize that year was a transparent plexiglass cube, and we told winners truthfully that somewhere inside that cube there is 1 nanometer of gold. Or nanogram, excuse me, of gold. And of course, there's at least 1 nanogram of an awful lot of different elements in there. You can't avoid that.
I seem to recall that you had awarded at one point trillions of dollars in prizes.
Yeah, for a long time, each winner, we don't have any money. We scrape to make the ceremony happen, and the winners have to find a way to get themselves to the ceremony and then get themselves home if they want to return home. But we did come up with a way to give each winner or each winning team a lot of cash, $10 trillion. Each winning team gets a $10 trillion bill from Zimbabwe. You may remember Zimbabwe had a little adventure with inflation of its currency. The government official in Zimbabwe who was responsible for creating those $10 trillion bills won an Ig Nobel Prize for that, won the Ig Nobel Mathematics Prize, because he was at the same time having his government print currency with a face value, different values. The highest face value is $100 trillion. You can get a $100 trillion bill. And at that same time, he was having the government print and distribute bills of the same physical size and appearance with a face value of 1 cent.
Well, you should possibly raise money by having people send you their old pennies, since they've been done away with by President Trump. Get those pennies in there.
How much do you expect we could make doing that?
Well, I've got buckets of them because I never had any reason to spend them, and I'll send you my buckets.
Yeah. So you think you might have as much as, say, $50?
Maybe not.
All right. So
I've heard of people stealing copper. I mean, copper is apparently valuable.
Yeah. But so say $40 you might have, $40. Do you think we can finance the whole ceremony on $40?
Depends what size buckets and how many of them there are.
Yeah, you'll pay the shipping, I hope, because we're not able to afford that. We stopped giving $10 trillion bills this past year because we had bought them in bulk. They used to be really inexpensive once the government in Zimbabwe declared them to be invalid as currency. But they're becoming somewhat rare and the price is going up. So we can no longer afford to buy $10 trillion bills.
So
what we did last year, rather than give each team a $10 trillion bill, we gave each team a moist towelette.
You know, I just wonder if there's a chance that funding will dry up for the kinds of things that you include, whether this kind of research will become practically obsolete because nobody will fund it anymore.
Oh no. For one thing, nobody funds most of the things that win a prize anyway.
Interesting.
Although
Yeah,
almost everybody's first question is about funding and the assumption that governments are spending huge amounts on this stuff, which is not.
yeah, I was going to ask if the changes in science funding in this country were going to affect you, but it sounds like not.
Oh no. And for another thing, the prizes have always been very international. So, the winners come from all around the world. But most of these things, either people funded on their own or, a lot of these things were done as quite serious things. And you can take the most serious, consequential thing in the world, and with very little effort at all, you can choose to describe that in a way that makes it clear that it's really important, or you can choose to describe it in a way that makes it sound like it's worthless and an insult to humanity, just by your choice of words. Almost any, I would almost go so far as to say every, but I'll say almost every piece of scientific research or corporate research or personal research or whatever, people do in their daily lives that just are important to them that nobody else knows about. They don't think of it as science. Almost every discovery anybody ever makes starts out as not getting much acclaim from anybody else. The typical thing that happens when anybody first invents something or realizes something, big or small, is they tell the people around them who say, huh, or I don't care, or big deal, or so what, or that sounds stupid. That's how almost everything starts.
I would
Now, some
imagine.
things quickly get recognized as being very good in some way, and sometimes that's mistaken too. But to get back to the funding thing, funding is not a good measure of whether something was important or not. It really isn't.
I would imagine that some of these things had to have a grant written up, and I would just love to read some of those grant proposals.
Nothing's stopping you.
I don't
And
know.
again, a lot of these things, when you see the write-ups, you will see nothing that strikes you as funny. It's just if you stop and think about what they did, you see that it's not difficult at all to describe it in a way that really is funny and intriguing. Instead, if you go and read any of these things that you're suggesting, chances are very high for any science published report or any published report anybody ever wrote for any purpose anywhere, chances are very high that the language will put you to sleep or make you decide after about 3 paragraphs that I don't care, I'm going to stop reading this. Or I don't understand it because they used big words they didn't have to, just to seem to be there just to intimidate people.
Well, or they're there because of grantsmanship,
Or that, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, you see it in
yeah,
artists too, where
yeah,
they write
yeah.
these very elaborate descriptions of what they do, and you sort of think you really didn't need to write about it in this hyperbolic way,
Yeah,
but they
although
do.
you're right, sometimes people do that because that's the only way that they can get the funding to make it possible.
It at Gathering for Gardner, they had this guy who stacks cards, playing cards. He makes these elaborate, like skyscrapers out of these cards.
He's a house builder.
Yeah, only out of playing cards.
Uh-huh.
And he had a dome, you know, and he said he liked coming to Gathering for Gardner because nobody asked him why he does this. Because everybody there practically had some pet obsession, you know.
Yeah,
They make weird puzzles or they do bits of obscure mathematics that you just sort of scratch your head about, or they have, you know, they've studied the mathematics of juggling or just something. Everybody seemed to have something. Yeah, and so it makes sense that what you're describing of
yeah.
scientists too, you know,
As you're speaking, I realized you could have a definition of obscure based on what you just said. Something is obscure if other people did it. If you did it,
Actually,
it's not.
I think a lot of people, when they have, I've known a lot of people who had hobbies that they thought were obscure because no one else was interested in them,
Mm-hmm.
because they didn't know anybody else who was interested in them. So I think they would have said those were obscure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I even think of folk music as fairly obscure because, there was that brief moment in the 1960s when everybody was singing protest songs, and then it went away, and now it's these little pockets of a subculture that struggle to find each other sometimes.
And of course, the Plutopia News Network podcast is pretty obscure.
Everything is obscure to a lot of people.
To anybody who doesn't know about it, that's true.
Can you think of even a single person who is known to everyone on Earth?
Yeah, Queen Elizabeth came close.
Yeah.
Donald Trump, probably.
Yeah, and yet you can easily imagine that there are millions of people who never heard of either one of them.
Obscurity is in the eye of the beholder.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think Elizabeth, because she was queen for a very long time,
Mm-hmm.
she came close to being she probably was the most famous woman in the world in her lifetime. Certainly by the end of it.
Mm-hmm. And now?
Ah, well.
Are you starting to have trouble getting people to come to the United States, the international winners?
Yeah. That started this past year. Up until this past year, just a few months ago, the ceremony this past September, almost all the winners would come every year. This past September was different in the ceremonies in the United States. Of the 10 new winners, when we were talking with them in advance of the ceremony, 9 of them were very eager to come, even though we did have discussions about things here are not the way they have been. Things are getting uncomfortable. Still, 9 of them said, we know we want to come though. The 10th one said, we're very happy to accept the prize, but there's no way we're going to travel to the US. And that's fine. But in the week and a half prior to the ceremony, 3 of the others decided they did not feel comfortable or safe traveling to the United States. So we had 6 of the 10 present at the ceremony. What we did for the others, because we wanted them, something that, a nice thing that happens to a lot of the winners that we can't control, but it does happen for a lot of them, is that they get a lot of press attention around the world. And often, especially so, in their own field. And most people in the world get no attention in their lifetime for anything they do, no matter how wonderful. So we wanted to give the winners the chance of having that happen for them. So what we did for for the benefit of these 4 winners who couldn't come, some of them were teams, was they sent us their acceptance speech, which is about 1 minute long. For each of them, we had a Nobel Prize winner on stage read their acceptance speech on their behalf. And then we, in subsequent weeks, we organized some events in other countries for some Ig Nobel winners, some public events to get people the chance to have some attention. And there are some more events like that coming up later this year. Every spring, going back a couple of decades now, I go to Europe and meet up with a bunch of Ig Nobel Prize winners, and we do public events in lots of places.
I guess the other thing about the USA now is that a kind of, at least in some circles, diminished respect for science.
Yeah, I think if you chop off the last few words of your sentence, it's still accurate. In the United States, there is diminished respect.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for science, very much so. And yet, I think at the same time, a lot of people are starting to appreciate that this science stuff is important. And as they appreciate that, at least a few of them are looking at it in more detail and deciding, this is also kind of interesting too and kind of fun.
I mean, we were talking about the lack of respect for science and then the lack of respect, period,
Yeah.
in the USA. And really, it's just kind of, I mean, it is a chilly time in the USA right now.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily cold chilly, but chilling effect chilly.
Mm-hmm.
And part of my question, or an implication of my question, was whether that was having an effect on your event and also your publication.
Yeah. We're making plans to deal with this problem in this year's 2026 Ig Nobel ceremony. So we think we've come up with a pretty effective solution, which we'll be announcing a little later this year.
We've actually run out of time. Hopefully Plutopia can send an emissary to the next celebration.
That would be a very nice thing.
Yeah, it'd be fantastic. Well, thanks for joining us, Mark. This has been a great discussion.
Yeah. Let me, before you finish, let me make a plea to you and to anybody who's listening that if you know of or come to hear of somebody who's done something that should win an Ig Nobel Prize, drop us a note. That's how we hear about almost everything that wins a prize, is somebody, often just one person that we don't know, maybe in a place that we've never heard of, tells us about it. So if you hear of something, let us know, please.
And so where does the note drop?
You can go to our website, improbable.com, and you can get in touch with me through that. And you can also see a list of all the people who won Ig Nobel Prize winners and video of the ceremonies and links to a lot of the stuff they've done. And again, the things that win prizes, the citation that we give is usually about one sentence, and that's just opening the door to the other stuff that these people have done in detail.
And that's also where we go to subscribe and to buy tickets and all of that.
Yeah, please.
Okay, great.
We'll definitely have links when we post the podcast.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and thanks, Wendy, for starting all this off.
No, thanks for coming.
You can stay in touch with Plutopia at plutopia.io. On Facebook, look for @Plutopia News. On Twitter, it's @Plutopia. This is the Plutopia News Network, 20 minutes into the future.